In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to use blueprints. Alright, so blueprints are assets that allow us to add interactivity to our game. So whenever you create your games, if it is a game, you need to have some sort of interactivity to make it fun. And we can do that very quickly with blueprints. So to get started here, what we want to do is we want to make a very simple level blueprint. And a level blueprint is a blueprint or script or interactivity that is constrained to the actual level itself. Now there are other types of blueprints, but we're not going to talk about those. We want to stay very, very small in this first day with Unreal Engine 4. So to create a blueprint, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this light on and off based on a trigger volume that we put in our game. So let's go ahead and do that. To create a trigger volume or a collision object that the player can interact with, we need to go to our volumes section underneath the place tab in our modes panel. So let's go to volumes, and we can scroll all the way down to the bottom and you'll see trigger volume. Go ahead and left click and drag that into the scene, and by default it's going to be a box. Now we're going to set its mobility to static, meaning that it's not going to move. So we're just going to leave it right here, and we'll try to place that underneath the light here. To center that up a little bit easier, we can go to our top view in our orthographic, and you can grab your move tool and move that right over that light. Alright, perfect. Now I'm also going to take the size in the X and Y down. Let's go ahead and take this down to 100 by 100. Oops, let's do 100, excuse me. And then we'll go to our perspective view, and that should give me plenty to collide with. I'm going to go ahead and raise that up in the Z just a little bit. So that way we know that if we touch this collision, we can interact with that light source. Alright, so to get started with creating a blueprint or a level blueprint, we'll need to go up to our toolbar and click on Blueprints. This will give you a menu, and you can open the level blueprint or you can create a new class blueprint. Now again, we're not going to talk about that, but we do have Introduction to Blueprints that will give you more information about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at Open Level Blueprint. And let's go ahead and close down our tutorial tips there. We're just going to leave that alone. And I'm going to select that tab and drag it right up into the top here. Now you'll notice that we get a new interface, and this is the Blueprints editor. So you'll notice here at the top we have a menu bar. This is pretty basic across all software. It allows us to manage our files and debug, open up different windows if we need to. We have our toolbar at the top, and this is going to give us quick access to some of the most commonly used tools inside of the Blueprint editor, like Compile and Simulate or even Play. Now beyond that we have My Blueprint, which gives us an outline of the different nodes and events or functions or even variables that are inside of our graph. Okay? Now the event graph is where we're going to be placing all of these nodes, and we should be able to see them right here as well. But it's going to give you an outline view of it here in your My Blueprint section. Now we also have details, so you'll notice that nothing is here. That's because we don't have anything selected in our graph. Now to begin adding nodes or events or functions or variables to our graph, we could do it a couple of different ways, but I'm going to show you how to do it from your palette. So the palette is going to hold all of your different nodes. You'll notice that we have a favorite section. These nodes here are most commonly used nodes, okay? So you'll probably be using these in almost all of your projects. So to get started, let's bring in this Event Begin Play. To do it, left click and drag that into your event graph. Once that has been placed, you can select the event, and you'll notice this yellow highlight around the edge. And if you left click and hold, you can drag that around in your event graph. Now you also have the ability to pan your event graph, because we're going to have lots of nodes inside of this event graph. So to pan, you'll hold down the right mouse button and you'll simply drag. Now if you use your mouse wheel by scrolling forward or backward, you'll notice you can zoom in and out. This makes it very easy to navigate. So let's go ahead and left click and drag this right up to this line right here. It's not absolutely necessary. I'm just trying to give you some practice on how to move nodes around. Alright, so now we have this Event Begin Play. What does this event do? Well, whenever the game begins or the level starts, this is going to fire off, and it's going to fire from this execution pin. Now we need to pin this to another function and tell it what to do. So in this case, I want to toggle the visibility of our light. So let's go ahead and bring in a node called toggle visibility. Now we can search for it in our palette here. So if I say toggle, and you'll see that I get a list here, it says toggle visibility right here. I can left click and drag that into the scene. Okay, there we go. I could also right click in your event graph, and I could come up and do a search here as well. So I could say toggle visibility, but if we start typing that in, you'll notice that nothing's happening. Why? Well, you'll notice that we have this context sensitive. What this means is it's going to bring up any nodes that are context sensitive to your selection. Notice that I have toggle visibility selected, so obviously that's not going to show up. Now if I deselect that and then right click again, I could go ahead and type in toggle, and we should see some different ones come up. Now it may not absolutely come up, so if you uncheck context sensitive, it should show you all of the nodes. Okay, so that's just one way of bringing those in. Another way that we can bring nodes in is just by simply left clicking on a pin and dragging that out. You'll notice that we get a wire. This is waiting for us to wire it to another pin of its type, or to just drop it right out in open space, and this will bring up our menu. Again, we could do another search, but I would like to do a context sensitive search and say toggle visibility. Now again, this is not coming up, and that's okay because it doesn't necessarily know which function we're going for. So if you know exactly what you're doing, let's do toggle visibility. Now the toggle visibility will definitely work if we were to bring a light into this. So how do we bring in the light for our level blueprint? Well, what I can do is I can go to my event, or excuse me, I can go to my level, select my light, and then I'll go back into my blueprint and I'll simply right click, and you'll see it says add event for point light 1 or call function on point light 1. Let's go ahead and expand call function on point light 1, and let's go in and let's say, well, let's just type that in. Let's say toggle visibility. Notice how that's coming up even with our context sensitivity on. Okay. Now notice that once I have done that, it automatically created the point light as my target. Okay, that's great. Let's go ahead and select this old toggle visibility and simply hit delete. Perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and left click and drag that to my toggle visibility execution pin, and that is now wired together. Now what's going to happen is whenever I compile this and I hit play inside of my level, watch what happens. Let's go ahead and click on our arrow here and hit play. And so whenever we come in, you'll notice that my light is turned off. Notice that there are no shadows coming from it. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit escape on that. Let's go ahead and select this light and turn it off by default. So to do this, we'll go down to our rendering section and we'll say visible. We'll turn that off. Now let's go ahead and hit play. And actually, before we do that, let's actually take this light and let's change. Okay, it is stationary. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and hit play. And you'll see now the light is on whenever the game starts. All right, so how do we tie that to the trigger volume? How do we make it to where it turns the light on and off? Well, what we'll need to do is select that trigger volume, and we'll need to use a different event instead of the event begin play. So let's delete that off. Let's go ahead and right click, and let's say add event for trigger volume 1. In this case, we're looking for a collision event, and we're going to say on actor begin overlap, meaning whenever we touch this trigger, it's going to activate this event, whatever's tied to it. So let's take our execution pin, left click and hold, drag that onto your execution pin of the toggle visibility, and drop that. Now let's compile. Let's go into our level. The light should be off by default, and let's simply play. Now if we left click and grab our mouse control, we can use W, A, S, and D to move around. let's go ahead and go over here to the area of our trigger volume, and you'll see that that light comes on. Now, if you're having a hard time trying to find that trigger volume, what you could do is select your light, and you can come in and you can uncheck Actor Hidden in Game. If you uncheck that, we'll be able to see that icon in the game, which can be very helpful for debugging. So left click again for mouse control, and for some reason it's not showing up. I'm not sure why that has happened, but it is coming up. That should be working, but that's okay. So now that we have that set up, how do we turn it off if we exit out of that collider? Well, to do this, we can simply go back to our level blueprint, and let's use a different event. I want to show you that you can add multiple events to a single node. So let's make sure that we have our trigger volume selected. So with that selected, let's go back to our level blueprint. We're going to right click down here, and we're going to say add event for trigger volume. And let's go to collision, and let's say on actor end overlap. And what this is going to do is it's going to fire off the event once we've exited away from that trigger volume. Let's go ahead and click on our execution pin and plug that into the execution pin of toggle visibility. Perfect. So now if I compile this and I go into the game and we play, notice that whenever we start playing, we can come over to the area where the light should be, and the light turns on. Let's move away, and the light turns off. Alright, so this is a very basic look at how to use blueprints for your games. Now again, we have a course called Introduction to Blueprint for Unreal Engine 4, and you can learn all about different types of blueprints and how you can create complex types of interactivity in your game. So in our next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Matinee Basics. Matinee is the animation system inside of Unreal Engine 4, and we'll take a look at that next.